Today we're going to talk about something that's near and dear to my heart and something that I love working with dogs and owners. Refusing food out on walks especially is something that I just love to work with. Why? Because lots of people think that it is a sentence that you cannot change, that if your dog refuses food on walks, then they are never going to take food on walks, they're never going to take food outside the house, they're never going to change, they're just not food motivated. I've been inspired to do this video by another dog trainer who said something that stuck with me. They said that taking food outside can be taught like any other behaviour can be taught, because it is a behaviour, it is a conditioned response. And it was like all the little pieces that I have been teaching myself and all the little bits of information that I've learned over the years about taking food outside all came together. And so I'm going to share with you how I have successfully taught dogs to take food outside who previously were not interested in food at all. As always, we are going to start with the why. Why is your dog not taking food outside? I start almost every video like this, but it has to be said, pain. If your dog does not take food outside, it might be because they are stressed, because they are in pain. They might have learned that every time I eat this food item that I'm given out on our walkies, my stomach really hurts, and they don't like that. Dogs have something that we call one trial learning. Humans have this too, but I'm talking about dogs here. This is where something is so aversive that it only has to happen once for them to not want to repeat it. When they eat something that doesn't make them feel very good, they remember that it doesn't make them feel very good. And if you're feeding them the same food items outside that don't make them feel good, guess what? They're not going to take them. This could also mean that any new food item that you're showing them outside, they might think, but when I eat food outside, my stomach hurts. So it could be something that they have learned because of how it makes them feel. And of course, when we're talking about pain, we have to talk about stress. For a lot of dogs, not taking food outside is a sign of stress. I know for me that when I'm working with dogs, especially dogs who have already taken food outside from me, even when previously their owners have said there's no chance they're taking food from you outside. Not a chance in hell. Them not taking food from me is like one of my number one signals that we are over threshold, that we are about to start trigger stacking. Bucket is full. We are so close to overflowing, and it is time to back off. It is time to back up. But realistically, there are so many signs before that I should be reading in dogs that warn me like, hey, it's getting into dangerous territory now. Things like their body language. I think it's really important to learn your dog's body language when it comes to stress, especially when it involves not taking food. For some dogs, this looks like a little whale eye, a little ear flick, a little spin on the lead so they can look at 360 look at their surroundings. For me, that's what it starts with, and then it can go to things like not moving, so planting their feet, or pulling really hard on the lead, really intensely watching something in their environment, or a displacement behaviour, so sniffing even though they've sniffed that patch of grass 3 times already, all the way up to you putting the food in their mouth, and even if they love the food item, whatever it is, then sort of tasting it around their mouth and then spitting it out. I think with any dog that's refusing to take food outside because of stress, we have to work on that first. We have to have some confidence in general first. And so if we're working on confidence inside the home first, I hope we can gradually grow that confidence further and further away from the house. The next reason your dog could be refusing food out on walks is because you have poisoned the food. This is when we have given a dog a piece of food to placate a feeling that they're having and a behaviour that they might be doing. For example, your dog is staring off into the distance when they see another dog and they're looking at them and they're like, I'm really trying to keep my shit together right now. And you give them a piece of food. What they might learn is every time I see something that scares me, like that dog, like that car, like that bike, and I'm still having this anxious reaction, I get a piece of food. Therefore, food means anxious. Food means fear. Food means, oh, I don't like this feeling right now. And she's about to offer me a piece of food. And I can't even think about her food right now. I've got to look at that bike, that car, that dog. I've got to think about this environment that's already stressing me out. Offering a dog who's already scared and already uncomfortable a piece of food, I know it's like the easiest thing to do. And in that situation, you just want them to feel okay. You want them to understand that it's not scary, but it's not doing what you might think it's doing. The food isn't making them feel better per se. The food is just tying the event to that reward, to that reinforcer. We don't want to reward the dog when they're having the anxious reaction, even if that reaction is as small as a lip lick or a glare to the side or oh, I'm not sure about that. We want to reward the dog when they've come back from that anxious reaction. That is what counter conditioning is being able to look at that scary thing and have the reaction of, human has food. Not look at that thing and think, human's going to shove food in my face. Another example of poisoning food for your dog might be, my dog won't eat this food item unless I stand by their bowl when they have their dinner. Poisoning the food really just means that you haven't tied what you really want that food item to mean to the food. There's another thing that the dog or you have accidentally reinforced as the cue or the meaning behind that food. Another reason your dog could be refusing food out on walks is because it has become a learned or conditioned response. If every time you try and give your dog a piece of food, they refuse it, you are rehearsing an undesired behaviour. But if we're thinking about eating food outside as a behaviour, if you keep offering it to them, even when they're going to say no, it is the same as recalling your dog when they're 200 meters away and them not coming back to you. You're solidifying that you don't have to take the food when I offer it to you, in the same way that you're solidifying you don't have to come back to me when I recall you. I see this most often when we have lack of consent from a dog. Now, I know some people are going to be like, why does my dog need to consent? The dog needs to consent because when your dog consents, what they're actually doing is showing you how they really feel. And when a dog shows you how they really feel, we can work on how they feel rather than just on how they're behaving. Behavior is just the response to the emotion. Think about it. When you're nervous, do you click a pen? Do you shake your leg? Do you play with the same piece of your hair? When your dog's nervous, they've learned refuse the food. In your dog's head, the behavior chain goes, I feel nervous, I do something that shows I'm nervous, the human offers me food, and I refuse food. Another reason is lack of value. Does your dog actually like the food, first of all? That's probably one of the most important things, like top of the list. We want to make sure the dog is actually enjoying what we're offering them. But the food item can also lack value for other reasons. One of the reasons could be their emotional state. That food item is not worth the behavior or the response that my human wants me to have, so I'm not going to do it. Or simply, I am too nervous to eat, which we've all been there. We have all been there. You will never override a dog's emotional state. Ever. Ever, ever, ever. You will never be more important than the dog's emotional state to them. No food item, no toy, no nothing will ever override that, but we can work with their nervous system. And the final reason your dog might be refusing their food outside is because they're fat. I'm sorry. It might be because they're fat. It might be because they're overweight. Free feeding and random treats throughout the day and not being purposeful or meaningful about your food rewards. Tut, tut, tut. Tut, tut, tut. So we've covered why, now let's get on to managing the behaviour. The first thing we're going to do is stop free feeding our dogs. We are not going to be putting the food bowl down in the morning and allowing food to sit there all day and for your dog to decide, I'll just eat whenever. You might think I'm cruel doing this. I'm not. I promise it's for a good reason. When you have access to something all of the time, how much less rewarding is it when you actually have it? If you say to yourself, I'm not allowed to scroll on social media until 4 p.m. every day, and social media is out of bounds until 4 p.m., how much more desperate are you to scroll? How many more times do you pick up your phone and think, oh, no, I can't. I said I wasn't going to scroll till 4 p.m. This is the same with food. This is the same with anything in your dog's life. With toys, with their favourite snacks, even with their dinner. Not only does it make it harder to tell how much your dog is actually eating and whether they're getting what they need in their diet, it also means that when you give them food, it's not overly reinforcing. It's not a fun event for them. It's not something we can use in our training to help them understand new behaviours and new cues and work with them and do fun things with them, because they don't really give a fuck about it. They don't really give a fuck about it. It's always there. Why would I care if you're offering me a piece of food? The next thing I'm going to make sure we're doing, both in and out of the home, is not offering our dog food unless you would bet money, I'm going to say a month's wages, that your dog is going to take that food item from you. You're not going to give it to them. We're not going to keep offering our dog food when they don't want it. Every time they refuse the food, we are rehearsing not taking the food. And the final thing we're going to do in management is making food more interesting in general. That might mean feeding through enrichment. That might mean Kongs and lick mats and snuffle mats and snuffle balls And that might involve that. That also just might involve putting treats in toilet roll holders and like closing the ends. It can be as cheap as getting a handful of their kibble and throwing it into a box that has all their toys in for their dinner instead of just feeding them out of a bowl. I'm not saying stop feeding them out of the bowl, and I'm definitely not saying only hand feed your dog. Nah. What I am saying is we're just going to make it a tiny bit more interesting. Okay, now we have managed the behavior. Let's start a training plan. We need to figure out a list of treats that our dog likes, from very, very high value to very, very low value. I want you to try and think less about the environment they're eating it in and more about the food item itself. For example, if you open the fridge door and offer your dog anything out of the fridge, there's a high likelihood they're going to take it, right? I want you to think about if you open the fridge door, got something out of the fridge, and then walked into the living room and offered it to your dog, who had been sat on the sofa chilling out, would they still eat it? Have a fun little like taste testing evening with your dog. Get a couple of treats, get a couple of different textures, get a couple of different food groups, and see what your dog likes. Also make sure that dogs can actually eat it. Just a quick Google will save you a trip to the vets. Once we've done that, we can create a list of places where your dog will want to take the food item. So I've already mentioned by the fridge. If your dog is a fridge fiend and knows the sound of the fridge door, that is a place where your dog is really, really likely to take a food item. And it doesn't really matter what food item, just about anything if they think it's coming from the fridge. A low probability place that your dog might take food is in the park where there are other dogs. I want you to get really, really specific. I don't just want you to say like in the living room. I want you to say like in the living room, in the evening, like 8 p.m. when I get my little biscuits from the cupboard and eat one too many of them on the sofa. Once we have those two lists, we can create a very short third list. This is going to be how your dog likes to take the food. Do they like to sniff it out? If you have a piece of treat in your hand and you offer it to your dog, are they desperately like sniffing at your hand to get to it? Or are they clawing at your hand? Do they prefer to dig and search for food? Do they like to chase after food? Are they much more likely to eat something if you throw it for them to catch? Delivery is almost as important as what you are offering them and where you are offering it to them. The whole reason you probably want to give your dog food outside on walks is because you want to work on some form of counter conditioning. Your dog is reacting to something in their environment, or they get a little bit nervous when you take them somewhere, or when they see something they're not too sure on, you want them to know that it's okay, that they're going to be okay. So I understand the importance of helping your dog to take food items. I understand how it feels to just want your dog to know that they're safe. Trust me, you're not alone. We can work through it. So we have our 3 lists. Before we focus on really training our dog with the food, so working with the food, we just want our dogs to learn that me plus food, handler plus food equals this is okay, equals something good is happening. The way we do that is not by feeding our dog by hand. Some dogs simply will not take food from the handler's hand, so we're going to work on that first. I highly recommend you purchase or make your own snuffle mat. I have made them in the past out of like old bath mats, and I've sat there in an evening tying strips of fabric to an old bath mat that I've stabbed holes in. Yes, I am that sort of person. It was like a nice mindless task to fill an evening while the TV was on. And I feel like this goes without saying, but if your dog has any resource guarding, you need to work on that first. So at first you're just going to introduce your dog to the snuffle mat. That means preparing it in front of them, letting them see what's going on, and placing a high value food onto the snuffle mat and putting that snuffle mat in a high probability place. That could be on their bed, that could be on the sofa, that could be in the living room, that could be by the fridge door in the kitchen. What we're not going to do is put it by the front door where they probably won't take food rewards anyway, or do it when there's lots of people over, or use it as a distraction to something. This is going to be wholly positive. Once your dog finds that snuffle mat interesting and knows that kibble and yummy things or steak pieces or whatever it is going to be on that snuffle mat, we are going to start feeding the mat. So as your dog is eating on the mat, I want you to go over and drop some more food on there. It's even better if you can drop something that's more high value than what they already have on the mat. So your dog is learning that when you give food, it's a good thing. Good things are going to happen. You will get to the point where instead of walking past, dropping food on the mat, you can sit with your dog and drop food onto the mat. You'll then get to the point where you can drop a few bits of food just off of the mat. And then maybe you're sitting on the floor with your dog and you put a piece of food on your leg, and then maybe on the leg further away from them. And then maybe you put one hand on your leg and rest it there and put the piece of food on your hand. I don't want you to go for this more than once. If your dog won't take the piece of food that is resting on your leg or on your hand that's on your leg, feed the mat again. or send them out to go and chase another piece of food. However they like to get their food, whether that's sniffing or chasing or catching, do that. If you can work up to the point of being able to have your hand out, not resting on anything, and they can eat the piece of food from your hand, this is when I want you to get your first list of different value treats, and I want you to mix in some middle value treats with those high value treats. Start off with the lower value on the snuffle mat and more higher value on you that you are giving the dog, and then make it completely random. You'll get to a point where you're in a high probability area, so let's say you were giving them the snuffle mat in the living room, and you're able to give them a low value food item, and you're giving it to them via your hand. The next thing we can do for our dogs is to add resistance. Now you might be thinking, why would I want to add resistance when my dog's only just learned to take something from my hand? When we add resistance to something the dog wants, a healthy dog will probably want that thing more. The way we do this is by adding tiny bits of resistance in increments over time. So the search cue, for me, the search or find it cue simply means whatever I drop on the floor, you can eat. If I don't say search when I've dropped a piece of food on the floor, that means we can't eat it. This not only helps with teaching your dog resistance around food, but it makes it more interesting. Why? Because they're not always allowed access to it. Remember when I said earlier that things that we're not allowing constant access to become more rewarding simply because we're not allowing constant access to it? This is that. This might look like holding a piece of food in your hand and your dog is sniffing or pawing at it, and only when they stop do you open the hand. And then you're going to pick that piece of food up with your other hand out of this hand and feed it to them. This encourages how we're going to naturally feed the dog when we're out on walks, which is probably with 2 fingers into their mouth. Other things you could do is cage the food. So pop a piece of food on the floor and cage it, and when your dog stops, they can get the food. And then as before, we'll switch it around. We might try a high probability place with a low value food item or a middle value food item. And then we might try a low probability place with a high value food item. If you're at the point where your dog gets excited for food and gets excited for your existence around food, we can start playing these games. For this, you can introduce having the lead on them. I personally love to work with dogs with a harness and lead on them. Number one, it helps if you need to maneuver them around something quickly or prevent them from doing something. Number two, I want the dog to learn that having the lead and harness on, it's still okay to take food items when we have these things on our body. If you're struggling with introducing the lead, harness and these games all at once, you can gradually introduce the lead and harness whilst you use the snuffle mat. This really is like a pick what works for you sort of scenario. You can try multiple things. It's okay if you fail. You're meant to. You are learning as well as your dog. So very, very simple. Again, you're going to start in a high probability area that your dog will take the food with a high value food item. You are going to start throwing food onto the floor. You might take a step back so your dog comes back towards you and then throw another piece out again. If you can catch the moment where your dog is looking at the floor rather than looking at you, throw another piece of food out and say the word search or find it. You want your dog to understand that the floor is where they are looking for this food item for their search cue. Once your dog understands that search means look at the floor and get a piece of food, you can try throwing the food in different directions. Once your dog understands moving in different directions to seek a food reward, that's when you can change up your environmental probability, so a higher probability to a low probability place, and the value of the food. I would work specifically in doorways. That is always a very, very good place to work. Why? Because we want our dog to take food out of our front door. So if you can work from the hallway to your living room or the hallway to your kitchen, if you have a back door, great. Work from the back door out into the garden and then back in again. You can start with standing outside and sending them inside and throwing the food in the house to get the food, and then you can graduate to you standing inside and throwing the food outside for them to go and get. If you're doing this with the lead and harness on, which I highly recommend, you can start to work on walking your dog with you, next to you, throwing the piece of food out and giving your search cue. Then we've got harness, lead, walking with you and taking a food reward. Yes, it may all be inside the house or just by your back door, but this is how we encourage the dog to start taking food out of the house. And this again is where we add that extra layer of restraint. If you can throw a piece of food out and hold your dog and wait for them to relax into your hold and then say search or find it, and then they can zip off and go and get that food, and you can run in the other direction and give them even more food rewards when they come back to you, which might mean throwing it more and saying search. It might be throwing it directly to them so they can catch. It might be throwing a pile of food in the long grass so they can sniff. Sorry, I'm getting excited talking about this. I love training this so much. That means you are in a place where you can graduate to taking this out the front door. We're going to do essentially the same things that we did at the back door or at the living room door or the kitchen door as we are our front door. We're going to play that bounce game out of the front door. I want you to offer your dog one food reward once at the front door. Like front door open, you're going to take one step out, offer them their highest value food reward in the way they like it to be delivered, and then you're done. I want you to walk back in, harness and lead off, chill out time. This will preferably be at the end of a training session, so your poor dog doesn't actually think you're going out for walkies. Do this over and over. Repeat this as many times as you like whilst you're training. Then one day I want you to do it before you go out for a walk. So they take the food reward, you can come back in, shut the front door, and then you leave again for your walk. You're not going to offer your dog any other food items on this walk, not even once. You can take them with you if you like, but you're not going to offer any. Do that a couple of times, and then I want you to see whether you can add that in at the end of your walk as well. So you might throw the treat into the house when you finished your walk. And then we're just going to gradually add more and more treats. I would say that it's a good idea to still be doing the fun games that they love in the house with the food rewards at the same time. Do not stop just because you're giving them food outside. I don't want them to relearn that food outside is something I feel nervous about. I want the games and the fun that you have in the house with food or in the garden or in the driveway or by the front door to carry on. At the moment, you've still got a very low probability place, and so we're going to match that up with a high value food item. Maybe this time you take 2 steps before you throw them a piece of food that they have to catch or throw food down on the floor. What I want you to be very aware of is only ever escalating the behaviour. For a dog that's already nervous or wary, that's not going to make them feel too great. We don't want them to ever think that things only ever get harder and harder when they do these things with you, and that we can just have fun and do the easy things as well. You know those games you played in the house that kind of would look weird if you did them out of public? Yeah, well, you're going to do them out in public, sorry. You're going to play those bounce or popcorn games with the food. When they come back to you, you're going to start walking backwards a bit and have food in your hand and spin it around you. You're going to throw food in the long grass for them to sniff. All in areas where you think they are more likely to take the food items. You have your list. Reference your list. And it's same old, same old. Once they can take the high value food items, we're going to start swapping out the value of the food items. So it will be lower value, and then middle value, and then high value, and then middle value again, and then high value, and then low value. If your dog ever spits out a piece of food or refuses it, I want you to stop offering. I want you to go back. I want you to change environment. I want you to see what it was that prevented your dog from taking that food item. Was it there were other dogs over there? Was it something in their environment was triggering them? Was it that they were just overtired? Was it that they've had too many pieces of food this walk? And see where we can manage that. Maybe we're not offering food in front of other dogs at the minute because they're still not at the point where they can take it. Set yourself up for success. We do not want them rehearsing not taking the food. Your dog preferably should hear that search cue and be excited, be looking and sniffing around already. Another thing you can do is work on a positive interrupter. This is simply where you say the same word every time before your dog gets something really, really rewarding for them. I personally use ready.
Ready, steady.
And the dogs love it. Every dog I work with now snaps and looks at me when I say that word. I'm at the point now where I don't always have to give a massive reward when I say that word. I might ask for a cue or an alternative behaviour to the one that I want, but they know something good is coming when I say that word. You might already have this if you have a, what's this? I personally wouldn't practice using what's this if you've already used it, because your dog might have behaviour chains that you don't realise they have. So maybe just pick a new word, a different word that you can really charge up that means something cool is about to happen. I really hope that by that point your dog is able to take food rewards from you outside. The formula is always going to be the same. If your dog is struggling with an area of low probability, environmental low probability, that when they're in this place or when they're experiencing this trigger, they're not going to take the food item, you have to pair it with a high value food reward first and a high value way of them getting the food. Then we can transfer the value to lower food rewards or different food rewards. Ultimately, I really hope that you get to a place where you don't need to have food on you on a walk for your dog to do what you're asking them to do. But to get there, we usually need food on us first to be able to count in addition and to be able to show our dogs that what they're doing is the right step, is the right move. Food is a great gateway to that. It's a great doorway to getting to that place. It will take time and it will take effort, and it will be worth it. If you enjoyed this video, it would really mean a lot to me if you liked and subscribed to my channel. If you would like to work with me in one-to-one classes, either in person or online, all my information is in the description below. Thank you for watching, and I hope to see you next time.